Okay, good. We're going to talk about the Indian Revolt of 1857. I used to say, what was the most significant contributor to England's possession of India? And one of the options was pork grease. And people looked at it and they thought, that's all really funny. But it was the right answer. Anybody know what the Indian Revolt of 1857 was about?
Pork grease.
Well, what about?
Taxes on it?
No. It's Indian. Oh.
Religious.
What about it? You're right. You know what the story is? You guys don't know this, I'll just tell you. We'll get to it. But one of the processes of modern states, and this is something I've talked about the whole semester, maybe I don't get into the details, but one of the things that makes a modern state is a standing professional army that uses scientific methods. The invention of gunpowder completely changes governments. Prior to the invention of gunpowder, you could have feudalism. If you go to Japan, you guys talked about the Japanese feudal era was kind of like European feudalism, right? You had knights, the samurais were kind of like knights. But this isn't uncommon. We saw something similar to this even back in Alexander's day or in the Assyrians. You had certain generals, certain soldiers that were different from the rest because of their equipment. They either had horses, they were able to work, fight on the horses, they had people supporting them. You look at Genghis Khan, the Mongols, the reason why they're so powerful is that they were actually able to be on their horses and fighting without ever missing a beat. So they were significantly better equipped than anybody that they were going against. Not just the equipment, but their skill level. Again, if you think about it, all they did was ride horses. In the knights, that's all that they did. They had other people working the fields. The samurais, that's all they did. So it's kind of a special class of folks that largely is based on skill set, right? You have to be good to be a soldier like that. And what does gunpowder do? You don't need the same skills. You just need to fire and shoot. So it creates a standing army. You don't have to collect all the good soldiers and have them be your captains and lieutenants. You can get anybody, any of the peasants, right? And you just train them. And you train them well with weapons, and that is a formidable force. Because it's not the person that's shooting, it's the weapon that's shooting. It makes a big difference. This is what transforms not only European modern nation states, but it transforms kind of modern nation states all around the world. In England, it's got this cultural diffusion in its process of colonization. England is not going to be shipping over information about how to build a factory in their colonies. Why not? You know the answer to this, even if you haven't actually thought it through. Why do they not want to build factories in India?
Because then India would get their knowledge.
Oh, yes.
Wouldn't make them want to not be a colony anymore?
Yeah, mercantilism is about getting more gold in than goes out. So you buy the raw materials cheaply. You bring it home. You turn them into finished products at home. Then you sell the same finished materials not only to your colonies but elsewhere in the world. If we have factories in India, then what happens to that equation? You don't, and why would they sell you the raw materials? They'll just keep the raw materials. So you don't get to buy the raw materials cheaply, and they're not going to buy the finished products because they can produce it there. And not only that, what would be worse of all? What if they started selling their finished products to their neighbors? Isn't this kind of exactly what happened in the United States? Isn't that exactly what the British were upset about? Is that we were trading with the French, we were trading with everybody else. They want us to be controlled. In the mercantilist empire, the colonies are supposed to serve the mother country. Now, one of the ways that they did that is that they had a minimal impact as much as they could on the local colonies. So you don't produce factories there. On the other hand, they also had this need for pacification. Remember, I kept using that term. What does pacification mean? To make peace. To make it peace. Wherever their trading ports are, you want it to be a peaceful port. Because if it's constantly fighting, you're not going to be able to trade, you're not going to be able to get the raw materials, it's going to be more money. And you'd actually have to send some of your troops there to quash it. You don't want to do that if you can. So the solution, we can send military technology. That's relatively cheap. And because of gunpowder and whatnot, all we have to do is train the Indians. Give them weapons. They can do this on their own. And so they had very specific training protocols. I don't know if you've ever seen the old-fashioned, everyone standing in line, they got their rifle at their side, with 3 steps to put on your shoulder, another step to put on the shoulder. Well, they had the other one where you put it in the front, and in order to load this, it's not a breech load gun. It's a musket. It's a barrel, a front end loader, muzzle loader. So you got to put in the powder. You got to put in the wadding, you got to put in the ball, no more wadding, stamp, stamp. Well, this they had down to an absolute art. So basically, this hand, take this hand, put it in your pocket, bite off the top, push it in here, put it back in your pocket, stuff in the ball, pump, pump, pump. Like 19 different steps. And they would do this because it was super easy. All you're teaching the Indians is how to do the steps. When they have a loaded gun, pick it up, aim, fire. Boom! You wait for the captain to do this. Well, part of these steps was that they had this packet where the gunpowder, this is 57. And I don't know if you know anything about weapons technology, but breech-loaded weapons are in about the next 10 years. Needle guns were around 57. You don't know this, but needle gun just means, a breech means you put it in the back end, you put the bullet in there, close it up, and fire it. The problem is they were terribly inaccurate and weren't very successful. So we didn't use them for another 10, 15 years. By the 1870s, we have cartridges where you just put the cartridge in, you fire, boom. Not in the 50s. So this is about the best you can get for muskets, for muzzle loaders. So one of the things that they're supposed to do is you have this little packet that's already got the gunpowder in it, and it's already greased. Because if you think about it, the ball goes in there, it's got to be greased. What grease do they use? Pork grease. So what they're doing is they're telling everybody, take this, put it in your mouth, bite off the end, stuff it in, pour, 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 put it in there, stomp, 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 ready to go. Well, what they end up doing is you put a little bit of that pork grease in your mouth. It's part of the process. It's in the steps. They're teaching all these. Why is this a problem? You what? And who is the they? And you're correct. The Indians and? Because remember, in India isn't just Hindu, right? Who is in India? Muslims, right? Because remember, Genghis Khan comes over this way. And then also the Middle Eastern folks are coming this way. So you have Muslims here, and you also have Hindus. Why don't Hindus like pork?
Because one of their gods.
Kind of. What's the theory behind this? For Hinduism. You should know this as a religious belief. Reincarnation. We never spoke a lot about Hinduism. I always felt bad about that. Let me go ahead and spend it today. You know reincarnation. We talked about this with Buddhism. Hinduism is totally, it's a political religion. So they had, in the 1200s BC, you had these Aryans coming into this side of India, where the Ganges River is. And they were conquering the people that were already there. And one of the ways that they kind of kept this in place is that they created an extraordinarily hierarchical society. You have hierarchies everywhere. A caste system is when the social hierarchies are fixed. Make sure you understand this spelling. I know you guys have heard this somewhere in your world history when you're in high school. A caste system. It's like a class, but it's fixed. Class system, unfortunately today you guys don't understand what that means because we use the word all the time. Middle class, lower class. It's totally meaningless. Back in the 1600s, you used to have certifications if you were a nobility. It was like having your own papers. That's what it meant by class. I mean, it wasn't something where there's wealthy is upper class. Because you could be super wealthy and not be upper class. Because it was very specifically related to your family lineage. Well, we don't have that today. Today we think of class just those people that are a little bit higher, those people a little bit lower. In actual fact, almost everybody you know are in the same middle class. You know, some people a little higher, some people lower. Remove what you know and throw it away for a second. Go back into a more unequal time. Caste means that whatever social position you're in, you are there forever. You do never change. And if you can understand this from a political perspective, the Aryans came in and they took over. That means that everybody below were always going to be below. This is where the concept of reincarnation comes from. Again, this is a theological thing where most people, they just don't know this. We assume, well, reincarnation is what old archaic religions believe in, like the Native Americans believe in reincarnation. No, they didn't. No reincarnation in Greece, no reincarnation in Mesopotamia, no reincarnation in Egypt, no reincarnation in the Celtics. Reincarnation is uniquely Indian. It starts there. It spreads to China and Asia through Buddhism, which we did talk about. Buddhism, the idea that all life is suffering, you just have to get rid of life. Nirvana is when you blow out, you extinguish your life. That's your escape. Right? Well, Hindu is where it starts from. Hinduism is the base. And reincarnation is just a political explanation. If you are here, then you are going to always be there. And the only way you get out is you die. If you don't believe in reincarnation, that argument doesn't sell very well. Right? You're going to always be on the poop scooper until you die. And then that's it. Right? People think that's unfair. But if you argue reincarnation, you'll die. And if you do this well, you'll come up to a higher caste. Right? And if you try to remove me from my superior position, you will then come down as a lower caste. That's the basic theory of Hinduism. Now, it's animism. We talked about this. Animism means that there's not just a few gods. We're talking millions of gods that are location specific. So there's a god that actually lives here. We don't have this concept of an omniscient God that knows everything. They are very specifically located. Some are more powerful than others. That's why I always tell you to think in terms of demons and angels, of actual spirits that have a physical existence somewhere, a physical place somewhere. And in Hinduism, that's what it is. But animism means that some of these spirits actually inhabit physical objects. So the hearth, or the doorway, or the bedpost, or someplace like that. So Hinduism combines the animism, the polytheism, and then it just adds reincarnation. So Hindus do not eat meat. Why is that?
Because that could be their uncle.
Because if you're bad, you get out of the human life form. Now, the way this works is that if you're really good, where are you going to go? You could be a deity. You could become a god. And even gods can become higher gods. So reincarnation is constant. You can understand why Buddhism did not succeed in India. Someone tell me why this doesn't work. Go ahead.
If you assume Buddhism is the right way, just a side question. When you blow out the Bible, so to speak, you don't reincarnate, right? That's the end.
That's it.
Okay, so if you did that, and let's say you're at the bottom of the pyramid, that's all you have, so why would you hasten yourself to die?
That's right. And it's even more than that. If all life is suffering, then it doesn't matter if you're on the high end or on the low end. All life is suffering. Everyone is deceived. So the only way you can escape it is to try to blow out and cease to exist. For Hinduism, eventually, if you get up high enough, you can be part of what this is called the ahisma. It's kind of like soul, but there's like a universal soul. You still lose your identity, because if you think about it with reincarnation, what is your identity? You know, I come back as something, I don't remember what I was before. So you kind of lose any sense of identity, and you become part of this kind of universal soul. That's Hinduism. So there is some reward eventually. You don't cease to exist. But this is kind of the plus and minus system. Buddhism says it's all a big lie. Because remember, Buddhism is kind of atheist. Your goal is to get out of this life. And so, how would that affect your political structure? Fundamentally, is there a difference between the higher and the lower in Buddhism? No. And so fundamentally, is there any opposition to killing the guy who's up top? He is not authorized to be mean to you because he's done something better in a good life before him. Everybody is suffering. Everybody is equally in problems. And so if he is unjust to you, then you are justified in responding back. This totally does not work in India. So Buddhism, it's out. Even though, where does Buddhism begin? In India, out there by Tibet region. It's up this section of India. But that's where it starts. It shifts into China. It doesn't succeed in India. Because in India, Hinduism is political. Now there is another religion, though, that comes into India. It doesn't seem to have the same problem with this. What is the religion? Islam. Do you remember talking about Islam? What is the fundamental principles of Islam?
That God's law is above man.
That's it. I mean, if you were to reduce it down to anything else, total submission to God. That would be probably the best mission of Islam. Now, they don't particularly have any hierarchies, but on the other hand, they're not at all opposed to hierarchy. Because one of the things of total submission of God is that God's law is above the tribal law. And if this guy is speaking for God, then you do not question him. And so if you come in and you're Islamic and you're living up on this side, right? And these guys who may not be Islamic, they may all be Hindu. What have they been taught from Hinduism to do to the people that are above them?
Leave them alone.
Leave them alone. Respect them. Do whatever they say, right? And for the Muslims, what have they been taught? If you're not Muslim, it's like you're dead man walking, right? You're not. Did I mention this? Oh, maybe I should. Good.
In the Quran, does it say they have, like, their goal is to, like, change people that aren't Muslim?
No. They're just saying, this is the way of God. You either follow it or you don't. If you don't follow it, you are outside of God. And so your heaven starts right here on earth. If you don't follow it, you don't have free will. So you've already removed yourself from God. So there's no change. It doesn't mean that you can't convert, but if you do, it's because God wanted you to. If you don't, dead man walking. You're already hell. You're already dead. This is the whole concept of the suicide bomber idea and the jihad, because all these people are infidels. Now, there are some extent, we'll talk about this in a second, there's some theological disagreement that comes up in the 1800s. But basically, if you believe that anyone who's not Muslim doesn't have that same right, then do you have any problem with a caste system? If you're Muslim and you're at the top of the caste, would you have a problem? Now, you might have a problem if you're at the bottom of the caste. But if you're at the top, no problem at all. And so that's why you can see you have both. Well, what do Muslims have a problem with? What do Muslims have with pork fat?
Fasting.
Yeah, it's hard. You guys don't know this. I didn't tell you. I'll tell you now. Islam comes out of Christianity and Judaism. I thought I told you about this. So they believe that there's like 7 main prophets, and Jesus was not God, he was a prophet. And so Muhammad was the last prophet. And so what he did is he completed what was revealed. So everybody reveals a little bit. Abraham reveals a little bit. Moses reveals a little bit. Noah, you've got key guys that they reveal a little bit to the world. And then the very last one was Muhammad, who reveals the last bit. Now you have to understand, of course, why do they believe this? If they believe that Jesus was God, then there's nothing more. You can't have another revelation. Now, Mohammedans actually believe in Easter that Jesus died and resurrected. But they don't believe he was the Son of God. He was just a prophet. He was giving one more type of revelation. So that when Muhammad comes, he also gives one more type of revelation. So why does this matter to us? Because in all of the beliefs that the Jews had and the Christians had are somehow compatible with the Quran. If you read the Quran, they talk about Jesus and Mary in there. They talk about Abraham. They're all kind of part of it. So what's with the pork?
Isn't there like a kosher thing?
Yes, there's totally a kosher thing. Absolutely there's a kosher thing. In Exodus and Deuteronomy, when you're talking about the clean animals and the unclean animals, you guys don't know this, but it says very clearly it has to chew its cud and have cloven hoofs. And so pigs were always seen as unclean animals. They have cloven hooves, but what don't they have? Cud. They don't chew their cud, so that's why they're unclean. And so pork has always been considered unclean in the Middle Eastern areas. And so Islam looked at pork as being unclean. So here we have two sides, whether you're Hindu or Muslim. It doesn't matter which. Both of these guys are going to be upset that you're sticking pork fat in your mouth, right? Now, what is the British concern? Do they have any knowledge of this? No, it's not money. It's why are they training these soldiers to do this? What's the advantage that gunpowder has that the Middle Ages did not have?
It's easier to train.
It's just easy to train. Remember, the knights had to be trained, that's all they did. The samurai, that's all they did. If you're looking at old-fashioned military, you have to cultivate the really good soldiers. But with gunpowder, you just have to train them how to load and fire the weapon. And all they do is have systematic 19-point. You can have the dumbest Indian in the world, you can have the smartest, it doesn't matter, they all do exactly the same. And so they create this, not for India. This is the same method they use all over the British Empire. And so it's happening to be in India. And for some reason, the Indians don't want to do this. And the English, they're not stupid, but they just don't understand. Why don't you guys want to do that? It's not until these British folks say, you do this, what are you doing? You're supposed to be doing this. And then there's a rebellion. And the rebellion was that they thought, and remember, the Hindus, with reincarnation, the caste system, they are not prone to rebellion. Their whole culture is anti-rebellion. Except when you do something that goes against their massive cultural norm. No pork, no animal fat, and you tell them to stick both of them in their mouth. It's only after the rebellion that the British realized, no, we don't have to do this. And they came up with a different non-animal-based fat in order to train them. But the reaction was that it created a rebellion. And so what do you do with a rebellion? You put more troops in there and you quash it. And as a result, they basically took over India and made it a protectorate. Later, they realized we can't do this anymore. Does this make sense? So pork fat has a key factor. But at the same time, it also says a lot about the process of colonization.